Good morning. Welcome back to Coffee with the Callers. I'm Father Doug Jeffers, and I'm here with...
Father James.
And this morning we're talking about the subject of loneliness and a Christian response to it. Father James, what do you think? How do we begin a Christian response to the problem of loneliness?
Well, I mean, I remember a Coffee with the Callers that we filmed last semester, and it was the urban city episode that we filmed. And Father Doug pretty astutely said, that the odd thing about the city is that we have so many people here that are packed in tight, living together, and yet there is this sense of loneliness that can sometimes occur in that reality. The other thing that comes to mind when I think about loneliness is the idea of the difference between loneliness and aloneness. And I think every one of us is called to be able to be alone. There has to come some point where a mature spirituality allows you to arrive at an aloneness, which is not necessarily lonely. And I think what happens, at least in our modern American sort of experience, is that the idea of being alone, it scares us. We're like, oh, I'll never be happy being by myself. But I mean, you were talking to me about this Thomas Aquinas quote that talked about this idea that, spiritual maturity is when you can actually be alone and not be lonely.
When you're at peace with your
Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I think one of the first things to say from a Christian perspective about loneliness is that we never are alone. Right? We never are. There is a God who is present everywhere and who knows everything about us, who knows us better than we know ourselves, who, in a sense, is closer to us than we are to ourselves. But it takes some discipline and a process of growth to be able to be alone with Him. And sometimes we want to distract ourselves from Him with this or that or the other thing. And it takes some cultivating this sense of solitude. But there's a sense in which, if you read a lot of the saints, they craved that time of solitude because that was their opportunity to be alone with God.
One of the best things to use for that would be Psalm 139. Lord, you know me. You know where I sit and where I stand. Not a word is on my mouth. Before you, Lord, know it.
That's true.
You knit me together in my mother's womb. My inmost being, you know. So I always tell people when they come to me, Father, I'm struggling with loneliness. I talk to them about this difference between loneliness and being alone. And then I say, go to Psalm 139 and read that over and over and over again. And it will let you know that He is so interwoven with you that you're really never, ever going to be lonely. Yes, you might be by yourself, but you will never be completely alone, as you said earlier. So it's a beautiful psalm.
Yeah, it certainly is. Another thing I think from a Christian perspective is that, of course, we are, first of all, made for relationship with God, but we also are made for relationships with each other. And the thing about human relationships is, every human relationship has to do with sharing something. And, the more important, the more valuable the thing that we share, the deeper the relationship, right? So when all that you're sharing is, a trivial conversation or, just
surface conversation,
just surface level type stuff, then there's not a very deep friendship.
Sure.
It's, but when we start to share deep things, valuable things, precious things, then deeper relationships come from that, like in a family where they share the life of the family, which is a sacred and precious thing, and that makes a deep bond. And so if you think about it that way, Christianity opens up the opportunity for us to have relationships founded on the very deepest possibility, the possibility of sharing God, the life of God, the grace of God.
We have like 4,200 households at St. Louis. I would suspect that maybe 500 or 600 or 700 of those are single people that are living by themselves in an apartment somewhere or a house somewhere in the area. But what's interesting is that they live alone. They live by themselves. And yet, the place that they can actually strengthen this aloneness in relationship with God and each other is coming to Mass.
Yeah.
That when you come to Mass, you sit there with what seems to be total strangers. And yet, as soon as that Eucharist is celebrated, there is this sense that you, in your aloneness, are actually with other people through the Eucharist. So maybe the Mass would be the most effective way, in kind of a real, tangible way.
Uniting
How
us
can I
together.
handle this loneliness? Go to Mass and sit there with 900 people in the silence of adoration of the Eucharist, and you will feel the presence of others. So it's a difficult thing, and I wish that I had an exact answer for everybody, but it is something that is part of our lives as people. We do have to grapple with this sense of loneliness and this idea of, can I be alone and still feel the presence of God in others? So if you're struggling with loneliness, don't be afraid of it. It's okay. It's part of life. And maybe some of these comments that Father Doug and I have brought to you today on this Coffee with the Callers can be something that might help you through that and bring you from loneliness to a healthy sense of aloneness in the presence of God. So thanks for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you on Sunday.